So let's talk about consumer trust. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. And unfortunately, in a change to the printed publication, our scheduled speaker, Ian Anderson, is unable to join us this morning. But fortunately, and stepping in very much at the last minute, we have Head of Market Engagement at Zurich, Peter Hamilton. Peter's background, as many of you will know, is in marketing and engagement. He chairs the ABI's Retail Protection Committee and the ABI's Long-Term Care Working Party. He's a keen West Ham fan, so he's a happy bunny at the moment, or he should be anyway. And he also sits on BIBA's Access to Insurance Committee. And of course, in July of this year, he was appointed Disability and Access Ambassador for the industry, reporting to the Cabinet Office. So please welcome again, Mr. Peter Hamilton.
Good morning, all. Thanks to Kevin for the phone call yesterday. But thanks also to Stephanie and to Esther. What a fabulous conversation and discussion just now. I think we all kind of need to recognise the thanks that we owe to people like Stephanie, the nurses who've seen us through the last 18 months. Fabulous story, and referencing the safety nets and more, I think, is just very, very powerful. I've personally been involved in claims and promoting claims stories and claims numbers over a long time, and I don't think we should stop doing that. We should collectively be very proud of what we do. I think it's important to get out the fact that we pay the claims, the fact that actually we don't pay all claims, and why we don't pay some claims. So we need to continue to do that, but that's not what I propose to talk really about this morning, other than just to reflect on a conversation I had yesterday in a meeting where we were talking about claims and how can we present them, because we have some big numbers. So the ABI announced in 2020 that we paid 325,000 claims. That's a huge number, and Paul Reed from Vita, who I think is in the room somewhere, where are you, Paul? Just observed, he was putting it into context. So he was announcing these figures in a meeting, and saying, how do you contextualise that number? So he expressed it as the number in his hometown of Cardiff, so 325,000 people. That means everyone in Cardiff would have got a payout in 2020. He also expressed it in relation to football grounds. So actually, if you added all the Premier League London football grounds and assumed they were full, you'd have just about 325,000 people. So again, you can start to picture if that helps create the image of how many people we'd help. Numbers aren't enough alone, clearly, because you've got the danger that you just look at those numbers. And in the football context, you'd have 60,000 people at West Ham who'd be joyful, ebullient, enthusiastic. You'd have 60,000 people at Arsenal who'd be quiet and sullen, basically. So it's important to have the context and the stories behind the numbers as well. So what I want to do is look at what consumers think about. And it's not just claims, it's not just insurance. They typically don't. So I'll look at two themes, really, that I think they will increasingly and are interested in now, and maybe we should start to reflect on within a protection context too. There are some advantages in working for a big Swiss company. Obviously, the excellence of the protection proposition, but you know all about that already. Global insights. We have access to a lot of global research that we can call upon, and of course, the national flag is a big plus. And for those struggling with that, I thought I'd just explain it, because there is the Swiss flag with a big plus in it. So here's one of the research reports that we have done. This is a global risk report. Won't go through in detail here, but it is available. You can download it. It's done as part of the World Economic Forum, and you've got a whole range of things that they look at. I've just picked out a few, which I'll just touch on briefly. You don't need to read them all, but it shows the kind of thinking people are looking at 10 years out. What's going to be happening here? So, an anarchic uprising, young activists fed up with corruption, inequality and suffering, mobilise against elites. All AI-powered social media is exploited to spread disinformation, fomenting social chaos. Brain-machine interface exploited. Gene editing for human enhancement. Neurochemical control. Permafrost melt releases ancient microorganisms. So a warming planet leads to permafrost melt in the Arctic. An ancient virus unknown in modern science is released into the air, soil, and water systems. So be afraid, be very afraid. So it's good that people are looking at that. Well, one of the things, picking up on some of that within Zurich we've done, I'll just show you a couple of pictures from another report that we've done on sustainability, which is one of the flavours I want to talk about here. So here's our Chief Executive, Mario Greco, talking about a future that exists where people choose Zurich not just as an insurer, but as a company that stands for the right values, that delivers a unique customer experience, improves social conditions, and does good for all stakeholders. And that's kind of really the theme. It's not just about insurance and people, it's all stakeholders, by which we include the planet. It's in our hands. Let's make it happen together. This is far too difficult for you to kind of possibly see, so don't worry about that. But what it is, within this booklet, again, it's about 60 pages on sustainability, which sounds a terrible long read, but actually it's very accessible and easy, and I think got some interesting insights in what's happening in our world. So there's a couple of matrices. What is important to consumers? So we picked 10 stakeholder groups and asked them what's important. And there's a line that says importance to our employees and what we can influence, and importance to our external stakeholders. And from that, you decide, what are we going to work on? What are we going to act on? And within that, there's two subjects, basically, that I've picked out. There's lots of things in there. There could be natural disasters, well-being and health, local community sport, all the things that we need to reflect on. But I'll just pick on a couple, climate change and data and digitalization. I think climate change, if you're in wealth, you're talking about this every day. You're seeing articles about ERG and so on, but how often do we actually pick it up within protection? I would suggest not very often, but I think if you look at our consumers, what are they interested in? Increasingly, it's sustainability, it's the environment, it's the planet. Here's a picture. This isn't a Photoshop picture. This is from a few years ago. Some of you may have seen it. So basically, it's a nice metaphor for what's happening. We have literally been watching the world burn around us without really paying much attention. So, this was in America, I think about 3 years ago, and there's a bunch of guys just playing golf while literally forest fires are raging behind them. So it says everything you need to know about golfers, obviously. And climate change will start to affect the insurance industry specifically as well. So clearly it does in the general insurance business, because you've got floods and you've got all kinds of damage in the general insurance context. But increasingly, and we're seeing it now in floods in Europe, for example, and death tolls rising, and most obviously the COVID pandemic, which was a lot of these diseases will come from the impact that we have in the natural world. So the fact that our deforestation is leading to closer and closer links with the natural world means some of these pathogens just get released in a way that wouldn't have happened before. So again, I'm not going to go through the detail of that, but it is important within a climate context to start to think, how does that impact on our lives, livelihoods within a life insurance context? So reputation does matter, though. So here, just a couple of examples. I think there is a danger insurance is seen as the bad guys, particularly when you see protesters taking green paint and tipping it all over Lloyd's of London or whatever it might be, because of our involvement in insuring the polluters out there. And it's a tricky question, because you can't simply stop insuring all these things, because there are communities and so on that live close to oil wells or whatever it might be who would really struggle were the damage to be done, there's no insurance involved in it. But we need some kind of transition away from the way we work with the polluters within the industry. And the consumers won't let us forget that. So today, I think there'll be a lot of people who just look at these kind of headlines. But actually, we've got a huge opportunity from a consumer perspective, I think, just to change the narrative from their perspective and see we can be the good guys here. And I picked this up at an ABI conference a month or two back, which was expressly on climate change. So again, I've got there's 4 pillars here. Don't worry so much about the detail. And there's a really good paper actually on there. You can find on the website if you wanted to look at it. But they start to kind of really focus on the difference that insurers can make. So at one level, there's pledges about how we will meet our own targets within there. The second slide there, the one that struck me the most, was just an observation of how much money we control as insurers if we collaborate together on this. So the journey to net zero will require something like £27 trillion by 2050. That's a huge amount of investment. But actually, insurers, were we to get some kind of relaxation on some of the capital adequacy rules in terms of our investments, we could contribute a third of that, so £9 trillion. So suddenly, you can be on the side of the good, putting the money towards things that will transform our economy, transform our environment. So there is more work to be done there. But more and more companies now are spending more and more time. At the same conference, the CEO of Direct Line, Penny James, observed she spends 25% of her time on climate change initiatives as an insurer. That's huge. And she also told a really lovely story, because the third slide there talks about what we can do with our supply chains and how we inform them. So one of the things that they do at Direct Line, looking at the suppliers they have, they worked out that actually the way when they repair cars, the thing that creates the most carbon in all their processes is when they respray and the paint dries. So they're just trying to work out how better to do that. They are literally paying people to watch paint dry, as part of their commitment to it. So just very powerful focus on what within the insurance industry we can do. And then at an individual company level, there's so much more we can do as well. So within Zurich, we, for example, on our GI side, will use replacement rather than brand new. With customer consent, they need to understand that they're getting in, it's going to be quality, it's going to be good, but that's what customers want now. I'll skim through this quite quickly. Other than to acknowledge, here's another recommendation for alongside the risk report to package up for your loved ones under the Christmas tree. John Steinbeck wrote in 62, everything we use comes in boxes, cartons and bins, the so-called packaging we love so much, the mountain of things we throw away are much greater than the things we use. In this, in no other way, we can see the wild and reckless exuberance of our production. So why does it matter? Consumers will pay extra for people that they can see are engaged. Employees want to work for a company which attunes with their own values. They want a company that is looking after the planet. More and more, this is the case. And within that research, there was some age differentials, but not huge. Actually, more and more people want this. Here's just a slide from Hymans Robertson, Consumer Survey Results 2021. So if anyone's in the room, thank you for this. Given the time, I didn't get the chance to ask your permission, so I'll beg for forgiveness for just throwing it up there. But 50% of customers would alter a consumer's choice of insurer if they're investing in projects to reduce plastic waste. 10% of proceeds given to green causes. Plant a tree for every policy sold. Consumers now are starting to vote with their feet, not just for insurance, but for other products too. And we can't ignore this, but I think within the insurance world we have so far, largely. And last one on climate change, so here's a Zurich plug. So this year, Zurich Protection have planted 75,565 trees so far. That's more than, to come back to Paul from Vita, 31 full-size football pitches. So data and digitalization. Here's the other area that I think we will need to focus on. I'm going to speed up necessarily because the one thing I didn't get to do was practice the run-through and how long it would take. So I've got another half an hour's material here. DNA, genetics, I think is one of the opportunities, but one of the threats. There's so much data on us collectively now. What are we going to do with it? There's a fantastic book came out last year, The Codebreaker by Walter Isaacson, about Jennifer Doudna, who founded or discovered CRISPR, which is this kind of molecular scalpel that helps you to change dramatically the health of individuals. So we could get rid of single-cell illnesses, for example. Target and positive interventions, what could go wrong, insurance implications. My fear is with a lot of the data that we hold, whether it's DNA or any other, if we're not careful, we lose the benefits of pooling and we end up with an insurance target market of just the very healthiest lives. Because we know so much about you, we know so much about your DNA, the predictive capability of it is not there today, but that's the kind of thing that's coming. So be alert to the challenges and the opportunities with that. Digital future, so many good things, electronic access to medical evidence, analytics, customer journeys, when do people drop out of journeys, tailored communication, service enhancements, meeting life's changing needs, ensuring relevance, managing wellness and threats. Again, what could possibly go wrong with all this data? I think there's an echo of this, are we just going to have a narrow audience to talk to? When life insurance gives you AI, you should make lemonade. I don't know whether you saw the big company Lemonade in America had a huge Twitter spat with customers because they started to talk about how much data they have. They said, we've got 100 times more data than other insurers hold on you. But the way they presented it was just spooking a lot of their customers. So we just need to be really careful what we take and how we use it. So that they have presented themselves, the whole brand is, we are the good guys, and we're not like those adversarial insurers who look to refuse a claim. We're looking after you. But the way they present how they use data was really scary for a lot of customers, which caused a lot of them, and an apologetic tweet from Lemonade themselves. Last couple of slides. So this was a couple of years ago, actually. John Hancock added fitness tracking to all their policies. Are customers going to be happy with that? Clearly, the more we can encourage customers to look after themselves, the better. That is inherently a good thing. But customers, and some, will start to worry about, what are you doing with my data? So there was about 180 comments under this particular BBC website headline. You don't need to read them all. I've read them for you. Here was one I liked from Old MacDonald Taxed My Farm. I refuse to wear these devices. I find them tacky. My wristwatches are Breitling, made from titanium that cost me several £1,000s. I'm not about to detract from that with a gaudy bit of £400 rubbish or rubber plastic to satisfy some arbitrary requirement of an insurance company that thinks it's being edgy. Can't see it catching on, to be honest. Well, this hasn't worked quite so well. It was fine on my computer. And whenever I look for research, I always turn to the pages of Viz. I was walking through the town of Woking the other day when I stopped to consult a map outside the shopping centre. Imagine my shock when I saw the words "You are here" with a large arrow pointing at the exact location I was standing. Is anyone else uncomfortable with this technology? The nanny state is using to monitor our every move. So insert insurer there as well. So basically, to sum up, I think two big issues from a consumer perspective to think about, and it's up to us how we interpret it. Climate change, urgency. There's absolute urgency, but as insurers and as advisors, we have agency to inform on that. And data and digitalization. Is it just there to enhance propositions? Can we do that in a positive and helpful way, or are we going to use it to prohibit customers from accessing our services and just narrow the availability of insurance? Opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here, depending on how you read it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Introducing our next speaker. When she's not Marketing Director at AIG, Sue Helmont is an equestrian who competes on her own horse. A former underwriter turned marketer with over 30 years experience in financial services, in 2019, she was recognised as Marketing Leader of the Year. Please welcome Sue Helmont.
So first of all, well done, Stephanie, for having the courage to do that in front of all these suits. And well done, Peter, for stepping in. That was fantastic. So, consumer trust this morning, ladies and gentlemen. It could be said that consumer trust is at an all-time low. But I think there's plenty of consumer trust out there. But the way that it's happening is really quite changing. Trust in institutions like mine, AIG, with top-down governance, hierarchical trust, is no longer what consumers are looking for. In fact, individuals are putting their trust in one another, even strangers. Now, I'm sure some of these brands you're familiar with. In fact, how many of our audience today have been a guest of Airbnb? Let's have a show of hands. Wowzers, look at that lot. And how many Airbnb hosts do we have in the room? Only a few. It takes a lot more trust to be a host than it does a guest. What about TaskRabbit? Has anybody heard of TaskRabbit? No. Oh, well, yes, thank you. Perhaps you could do the talk. It's a sort of eBay marketplace for errands, where if you need an errand doing, like cleaning or getting your shopping done, you can put it up on the digital marketplace, and people will actually bid to do that service for you. In fact, TaskRabbit discovered that the most used job that goes up on TaskRabbit is to put IKEA furniture together. And then BlaBlaCar, my personal favourite. This is a technology platform that joins together people who are looking for a ride, a journey, with people that are already doing that journey. I think this one's fantastic because, I remember as a child being told never get in a car with strangers. And yet this whole platform is about getting in a car with strangers. And the insight that they built the platform around is the fact that how much time you will spend talking while you're in that car. So if you're my husband, you'll just do blah. If you're me, it'll be blah, blah. And if it's my mother, it'll be blah, 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 blah car, all the way from London to Yorkshire. And these technology platforms are really changing the way consumers see trust. So the power of technology, letting people stay in our own homes, sharing car journeys, doesn't end there. It's even extending to lending and borrowing money from strangers on Zopa and Lending Club. The question today that I'd like to focus on is, will virtual trust transform the way we trust each other face to face and bring both opportunity and challenge to the protection industry? But before we explore that any further, I thought, now I've discovered the button, it would be great to do a little trust barometer, our very own trust barometer in the protection review room. So it's a very sophisticated trust barometer because I know that everybody in this room, reinsurers, actuaries, qualified advisors, we're all very intelligent people. So what I'm asking you to do is, you can see the 3 brands up there. I've taken a bit of a risk putting my own brand up there. I want you to clap for the brand that you trust the most. Just once, and I can see you because I'm on the stage, so I'll see if you're cheating. We'll just get you to clap just once. So if you trust Facebook the most, clap now. Oh. Just the one, okay. If you trust Uber the most, clap now. Okay. Right, and here it is. If you trust AIG out of those 3 the most, clap now. Hooray! Excellent. All right, you've got the hang of it. This is good. You've got the hang of it. Now we're going to do the reverse, and because it's Christmas pantomime season, we're requiring a bit of booing for the politician that you trust the least. Who do you trust the least? You ready? If you trust Putin the least, boo now. Hooray. If you trust Trump the least, boo now. And if you trust Angela Merkel the least, boo now. Oh, Angela, it's her last day today, isn't it? That's fantastic. Oh, fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. So why am I doing this? Well, it's just a bit of fun, obviously, but it brings together a really important point. It's a rubbish exercise, of course, but of course the way in which we talk about trust is just that. It's, I don't trust car salesmen. Consumers don't trust insurance products. I don't trust advertising. But it brings out a really important point that both trust is really subjective and contextual. So you might trust Facebook to connect you with your friends, but you don't trust the way they use your data. You might trust Uber to get you from A to B, but you don't trust the way in which they treat their drivers. And you might trust AIG to take your premiums, but not pay out claims. How many times have we all heard that one? And it's the same in relation to the politicians. You might trust that President Trump, during his presidency, would tweet something ridiculous at 3 a.m. in capital letters, like windmills give you cancer, one for the underwriters out there, but you wouldn't trust him on climate change. So, hopefully you enjoyed it. Just a bit of fun. I always like a bit of audience participation in a presentation. But before we go any further, let's just think about what is trust. In doing my homework, I did a lot of research for today, and I was very much drawn to the work of Rachel Botsman. I say that very slowly because I'd like to give Rachel Botsman all credit for the content of today's presentation. Look her up. She is an expert in trust, an author and speaker on trust as well. So all of the content of today is really her intellectual property. And she concludes that trust is a process. It's a bridge between the known and the unknown. And trust and risk are brother and sister. So think about that, the bridge between the known and the unknown. So all of us in the room, think about the first time you ever put your credit card details onto the website, on a website. The first time you ever used eBay, or maybe some of you out there have one of those fantastic cars that park itself, and your first time you ever did a self-parking process. That is the trust. You put your trust in those things that it would work for you. And every time a client buys a new product from us, we're asking them to take a leap of trust from the known into the unknown. A bit like last year, for example, when AIG launched Critical Illness Choices, and we checked out of the conditions race, we asked advisors to trust us to go from the known, conditions counting, to the unknown. So what happens when we're unable to take a leap of trust? Well, we get stuck. We're frightened and we get stuck and maybe less willing to take a risk. Maybe there's something in that behind the 2.4 trillion protection gap. So how do we fix the lack of trust in the protection industry? There are very many familiar faces around this room this morning, and I know that a lot of you, including myself, have been in this industry for 25 plus years. And in many ways, the narrative around building trust hasn't changed much in that time. You know, we talk about simplifying policy wording, we talk about publicising claims data, we talk about communicating better and being more transparent about pricing, more transparent about underwriting. In fact, let's have a show of hands. Has anybody in their organisation talked about being more transparent? Yeah, a few. I'm not surprised. That's quite common, I think. But the way we build more trust is not to be more transparent. Now, don't get me wrong. Transparency is a good thing. We've heard talk this morning already about publishing, gender pay gap stats, and simplifying policy wording is also, a good thing. Those things are positive things to do, but they are not a way to. It's not a magical cure to building trust in our industry. In fact, if you think about this relationship, trust about a relationship about having a confident relationship with the unknown, then transparency is the antithesis of trust. If you need to have a more transparent relationship, you have lost trust in a relationship. So if this isn't the answer, then what is? So it turns out there's a whole science behind being trustworthy. Being trustworthy, there is an entire science about being trustworthy, and it's not one thing. There are a number of ingredients or traits to being trustworthy. And if we look at them from the left to the right, some of the ones on the left, competence and reliability, are the hard traits. And I just chose some brand names up here that might help support that by Googling most trusted brands. Competence is basically you're asking yourself, does this person or brand have the skills, the experience and the knowledge to do the things they say they're going to do? So your chartered insurance qualifications, your evidence of financial strength, those sorts of things. The second is reliability. Reliability is the feeling that you can depend on someone. And that comes down to two things. The first is responsiveness. Do they answer my queries? Do they answer my emails? Do they pick up the phone? And the other is about consistency, which is really hard. And this was where claim stats, I think, really come in, show a consistency of payout over time. And the final two on the other side are around the Y traits. They're made up of empathy or benevolence. I liked that, the use of that word, benevolence. How much do I feel like this brand really cares about me? And Macmillan as a brand are the most loved charity according to the Savanta Brand View research. And integrity, finally, the last one, integrity. If I had to pick one, integrity is the most important trait. And that's about alignment. Do the words align with the actions of their intentions? I think eCover are a great brand. They actually talk about living clean as well as clean living. And I think if I just skip on to this similar, I've tried to capture a few thoughts around us as a trustworthy industry. And I think we have done a lot of things to be a trustworthy industry. And you can read those from up there on the screen for yourselves. Peter's already talked a little bit about Lemonade and the challenges that we have around constructing a trustworthy brand where there might be a misalignment of attentions as perceived by the consumer. The insurance business model is one where we always have the upper hand. There's an asymmetry of power. The consumer gives us money and we have it and they feel disadvantaged because it's not a level playing field. And we collect the premiums for years, and now they're making a claim. There's an asymmetry of information. They don't really know what the policy says, but we do. So they see us they see the faceless institution as one that doesn't want to pay out because it means more profits for us. And this is really where Lemonade have made a feature of building trust. And in fact, their CEO says in doing so, the way in which they give back, any profits they give back to charity, the CEO talks about in doing so, they are solving an absolute business challenge, which is that insurance companies are deeply distrusted. Joe, you'll be glad to know I'm about to finish. Look at that, hooray. Okay, so I am going to bring it home, hopefully, and finish where I started, which is the world of digital trust in individuals and strangers, putting trust in other human beings and not in anonymous institutions. Botsman, who I referred to previously, calls this distributed trust. Of course, it isn't anything new. Technology is just reinventing our old behaviours. We used to barter, we used to swap, we used to even insure ourselves in local communities. And the trust proxies that we can see on the screen behind me, of course, they still matter, and they will continue to matter. But how do we use the online tools that I've referred to change trust and how we, in protection, interact with consumers in the physical world? Up Counsel is a legal marketplace for lawyers. They rate and review lawyers on every single interaction, and Vouched For is a similar peer-to-peer platform in the UK, which Simone just recently retweeted an article she'd written and referred to about these guys. And when you inject this kind of humanness into the industry, it changes market behaviour. I think it has the capacity to change market behaviour. So, the thought I want to leave you with today. Trust is a human feeling. It's a continuous process that happens between people. What if the protection industry could become a more seamless online community? Could it inject humanness that consumers perceive we have lost somewhere along the way? Thank you.
Thank you to Sue. And in other news, I've just realised there's stairs on the other side of the stage, which is really helpful. Okay, thank you. Introducing our third speaker, Abbie Knight is a specialist in all things marketing and digital. She is fond of ballet, yoga, travelling and skiing, but she's an outsider to the insurance industry and certainly the protection industry. So it's going to be interesting to hear what she has to say. Please welcome Abbie Knight.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. So I'm going to talk about trust in the age of disruption. And my background, as you heard, is not in the insurance sector. I have actually been working in financial services for the last 20 years. And we face a lot of similar challenges to yourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it through a lens of my passion and my experience, which is marketing and digital. And I've also read, I did go into do a bit of research into the insurance sector to check out all of the similarities that we have between our two professions. But, you know, that will only get me so far. So I'm going to talk to you about what it's like being a consumer and what my consumer network, who are also in financial services, had to say about the experience of insurance. So today's journey, I'm going to start off with consumer perceptions of what it is you do and the services you provide. Then I'm going to look at barriers to trust, engagement, and how that has changed in a digital world. And lastly, content matters and the importance of content and what you can do. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm actually not from here. I'm from Australia. I moved out here 18 years ago, still have the accent. So my first basically experience of insurance was in the Australian market. So in Australia, it's a little bit different to here based on my experience. And that was because I went to a financial planner and they were the ones that introduced me to protection as a concept. I didn't go and see a separate broker. I didn't meet anyone else. It was all done through my financial planner down there. So my financial planner started by looking at my savings strategy, any pensions that I had or superannuation, as we call it down there, my investments, and then my protection, because that was all part of the service, all under the same roof. Back then as well, I was still on my car insurance policy of my father. He was getting us a discount. But other than that, I really hadn't had any experience of the insurance market. So I decided for today's presentation, I would do a little bit of research. So I went out to my network of colleagues and friends in financial services and said, so tell me what it's like for you. So I started off by asking about corporate insurance. And a lot of my business owner friends and those in the profession basically said, I've had a good experience. You know, I've got a great relationship with my broker and everything goes to plan. So that was very good, and that was a tick in the box. Then I looked at, a few other services. And I looked at, these critical illness, private medical and income protection. When I spoke to people about those insurance services, they said, well, that's just something that I get from my employer. So they've got their employee benefits platform and they just see it as a provision that comes with their job. So they didn't really have any brand preferences or any other, comments to say about that. They just said, yep, it's just part of my package and that's what I get. So then I started talking about travel insurance, and every single person I spoke to said, yes, I get travel insurance. I don't know whether it's worth the expense, though, because I've never really called and I don't really know what it covers. And I did hear one horror story of a friend of mine who got stuck in Bali at the start of the pandemic, had to keep rebooking flights trying to get back to England as borders were closing. He still hasn't received a payout. He was bounced around. He was pushed back to the airline, pushed back to a number of different other authorities, and still hasn't got that issue resolved. So he was very negative on travel insurance. Car insurance, this is highly commoditized. No one had a favorite brand. Everyone that I spoke to had purchased theirs through a comparison site. And there was really no really thought or comments other than that. It was just a very easy process, they thought. Home and content, same thing, mainly purchased through comparison sites. Although those that have had to go through a claim said that the process and the post-sale service was very, very good. Life insurance. I had one person that had a very heartwarming story. His wife died, age 36, of breast cancer, leaving behind a 2-year-old daughter. He said that it was a very compassionate process. Everything was paid out, the money, her care, everything was looked after, and he said he couldn't have asked for a better insurance process. So I decided, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be a consumer buying life insurance. So before I do that, I just wanted to mention a few excuses that I heard during my research. First one was, I've been meaning to get it sorted, but I haven't actually gotten around to it. Or was a good one. I was paying over the odds. My wife always wears her engagement ring. Basically, I've been paying for it over the last 14 years. I could essentially buy a replacement diamond for that. The next one was, as I mentioned, travel insurance. Is it really worth the expense? I always get it. And people even get insurance when they're traveling by train to protect whether or not they end up catching that train. So, people are buying this insurance all the time, but they don't really know whether it's worth the expense. I don't trust insurance companies to pay out, was heard a lot. So what I came to the conclusion on this was, your biggest competitor, who do you think it is? It's actually inertia. And that's consumers just not actually doing anything. They know they need to get it, or they've got all of those excuses. It's a laundry list of excuses. So what do you do in that regard? But I think the real reason behind this is because it's so complex and they don't trust you. So I was really, really surprised. Again, during my research, shocked, that's my shocked face. Actually, it's a child's shocked face, but you know what I mean. 98% of claims in the UK actually pay out. And when you look at this is the top insurance payout ratios. It's really high. You do actually pay out. But no one that I spoke to believed that, except for one of my friends that had the life insurance policy payout on his wife, who got it through her employer, by the way, so we didn't go through the process to buy it. So my user journey was, I then decided that I would go to the world's best digital research assistant, Google, and I would look up life insurance 44-year, and I got all of these different suggestions there. So I was really offended by the auto-predict completions. It was actually quite sexist. But once I got over that, this is what I saw. So my search results basically started off with comparison sites, and it was all price-driven. Everyone was telling me how much I could pay per month for a policy. I landed on an informative landing page, which was very good. That user experience I thought was very informative. But immediately I was asked to share my personal information. I couldn't proceed without at least giving them my name and my email address. And I was shocked by this, because if I'm looking for a mortgage, I can go onto any website and I can use a mortgage calculator and I can try and figure out what kind of mortgage I can get. But for the insurance sector, I had to give you all my details. And it was very, very personal and detailed information as well. It wasn't just a couple of bullet points around what I was thinking. It went into granular detail, even asking for my postcode and my telephone number. They wanted to know everything. So how did I feel? The first thing I thought, well, you're taking all of this information. Is it secure? Are you going to be looking after my data? What are you doing with it? I don't know. I'm just pumping it into my computer here. How are you going to use that? But really importantly, especially because it's a life insurance policy, which is a very important piece of cover, is are you going to use this information against me? If I'm giving you all of this medical information and quite personal stats, like, is it going to come back to bite me? And what I didn't get at all was any value exchange. I wasn't giving you information and you were giving me something back, which is how you build trust. I was just giving. And that was a bit frustrating. So how do you build trust? Well, I looked like you did. I went and did a lot of research into what it takes. I read Harvard Business Review articles, a whole lot about trust. And then I thought, but you know what? I actually do this every day in my day job. I help clients to build content strategies that help them to build trust with their clients. So now, a lot of this has moved online, so I'm going to talk about how it's changed in the digital world. So digital client engagement involves taking them through a journey. The first one is know, and this is basically where you build general awareness and you tell them what your unique superpower is or your USP or your value proposition. So that's stage one. So they get to know who you are. So then, they kind of know that you're there if they start to dig around and look for the services you provide. The next thing they need to do is say, well, do I like you? And lastly is trust. Are you an expert? Can you help me? And is there proof to tell me that that's how it's going to work? So here's how this works in a digital experience. You start off by sharing your story. You tell them how you can help your target audience, and you be very, very granular in the people that you're talking to, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You then give further information on your specific services, focusing on features and benefits and not just selling to them. And lastly, and it's the most difficult, this is showcasing your expertise and showing that you're actually going to deliver what you say you will. I'm getting the 5-minute warning. So the unique superpower is who are you, what makes you different, but then importantly, why should I care? Why is that important to me? And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They think that you want to hear all of these stats and whatnot. No, they don't. They just want to know what's in it for them. So one way I do this with clients is I say, well, it's the blank method. We help X do Y. X do Y by doing X. So for me, I say I help entrepreneurial financial services firms to supercharge their marketing and communicate with clarity using the tools, techniques, and templates honed in my marketing agency. So I'm saying, you're an entrepreneurial business and financial services. That's who I work with. So you need to not only say what you do, but how you're different. So the differentiation test is really these 3 questions. But the biggest mistakes people make and this is what a lot of the sites were doing when I went through my user journey, is they're competing on price. They say never compete on price. Demonstrate value, and price is never an issue. I know that's a bit different in your sector, but, superior service as well is not a differentiator. You're not going to say you're delivering rubbish service. And don't ever say you have great people, because you're not going to hire rubbish people. And build trust and a reputation by being authentic. And what happens when you get this right and you nail it is you get what's called a sniper rifle focus in your marketing. So it's the difference between walking down a crowded London street and yelling, "Hey man," or "Hey man with the short blonde hair," or "Hey man with the glasses," or "Hey Abbie." And I'm not a man, but I realized that my example was very male orientated, and that goes back to what was happening with Google earlier. So anyway, I looked at the positioning of the top insurance providers, and this is what I found. 60% of them that I looked at in my very, very technical study was they were leading on price. They were saying, you can get quotes from £5, £6, or £7 per month. 1/3 of them were offering bonuses, and 25% of them were focusing on soft factors like, peace of mind, looking after your family. And this, protect what matters most. It could be the most important service you ever buy. That's something that resonates with me more so than giving me bonuses. So what I found was, in summary, it was a very, very broad brush approach. Your large organizations, often very faceless, delivering complex products. I was overwhelmed with all of the information that was out there. I was concerned about my data security. There was no value exchange. And the calculators to help me to figure out what it was I actually needed was so deeply hidden in the side, and I had to give information anyway before I could even get to them. It just wasn't a very good user experience. It was all about you, no offense, and not about me. So I then had another little dig around. Could you make a site like PensionBee for insurance? Like, that would be super cool. I did see Polly. I thought Polly was quite good. It was a very easy 2-minute engagement process. I had to mention Lemonade. I've always used them in my presentations because I'm in digital and they're a great digital proposition. But they've got a strong value proposition. Even if they go spouting off all these numbers that make people a little bit scared, they do have a great proposition. So to go through the know, like, trust stages in your business, the most important thing is the know stage, because I didn't know anything about you and I just felt like I was being sold to and there was a big barrier to entry. So give away content. Use this low-rich approach. Nurture people. Give away ebooks, guides, or reports, or give them something, a value exchange for the information they're providing you. And then you can start putting them into a content system where, like this, you're basically sending them emails that are triggered based on what they're reading and what they're engaging with. It then becomes about them and educating them and empowering them, and it's not about you anymore. And please don't give me any cheese. It's the age of authenticity, and people do not engage with cheese. We don't want cheesy photographs of people hugging each other. We don't look like that in real life. So if you want to take action today, the first thing I'd like you to do is to sit down, block out a couple of hours in your calendar, and brainstorm article headlines or content pieces that you could write with other members of your team, people in your business, or if you're a solopreneur, that you can do yourself. But think about the burning questions people want answered, and this is what you can use as the foundation of your content strategy, which you can automate to take the heavy lifting out of it using a process like the one I just showed you. So help me to help myself. Rethink your value proposition, create your content strategy, educate and engage, and remember, it's a long game. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abbie. I think we all know why the industry is price sensitive, and arguably for good reason, but I do wonder if maybe we've just seen a glimpse of what things might look like in the future, and especially if rates start edging upwards for the first time in a few decades. So thank you to all our 3 speakers. I will now be joined on stage by our 4 panellists who will take a few questions. If you can join me as I read out your name. First of all, Tim Smith is Head of Protection at Hanover Re, UK Life Branch. Then we have Daniel Pender. He is the former CEO and co-founder of Guardian and the founder of a new business called Insurian. Stephanie Hydon from iPipeline, and Esther Shaw, who you saw earlier, an award-winning financial and property journalist and former money editor at the Sunday Express and deputy money editor at both The Independent and The Independent on Sunday. Please welcome our panellists. Now, we've got a bunch of questions already submitted for this session, but if you do have a question or a point you'd like to make, do wave your hands and the roving mics will magically make their way to you so you can ask questions. We'll start with a question for each of our panellists, and Tim, perhaps I'll start with you, which is, we've heard a lot about complexity, not just today, but at many of these events that we talk about. And what do you think what role does complexity play in the erosion of trust in our industry?
So I think complexity is hugely important in the industry. I think it does erode trust. I would probably bring out, say, 2 examples of that. I think policy wording is a big one. So, in the context that consumers are looking for a reason to distrust us, they don't believe the claim stats. As soon as they see some policy wording that they don't understand, they automatically jump to the assumption that, okay, well, that's probably the bit that the insurer will use to sort of weasel out of paying my claim. So having really transparent policy wording, I think that's particularly important for something like critical illness. Another area is optionality. I think that can erode trust, actually. I think where, you know, we've got individuals who have a sense of what a critical illness is. They think of it as, okay, I've got an illness that is a life-changing illness for me, and I need some compensation to help me deal with that. That's quite a simple thing. It's very difficult to write that in a policy, but it is quite a simple thing, and most people have a sense of what should and shouldn't pay out. And having, say, 2 levels of cover, where one is more comprehensive than the other, basically says to people, well, okay, in some of these situations we'll pay out, and in some of them we won't.
But how do you think we can use data to help build consumer trust?
We've got all the data we could possibly need, but we can't bloody get to it or do anything with it because it's siloed. So what we need to be able to look at is actually a far more inherent and structural change within our ecosystems to be able to actually get a fully holistic view of our customer throughout their entire life cycle. Exactly what Abbie was talking about in terms of that lifelong view rather than taking that sort of quick shot. So I think, you know, for us, it's about then being able to join the dots, to be able to have one ecosystem, one database, to be able to get a single view of that customer and to then be able to start using it towards customer experience rather than just pricing and underwriting.
If you act in a way that you trust the customer, you earn the trust back from the customer. Trust, for me, there are 3. One is authenticity, one is empathy, and the third is rigor. Of the 3, for me, the thing the industry gets wrong is empathy. It doesn't make it about the person. And that's why the single life feature, or the dual life feature, you know, it's about you, Mrs. Smith, and you, Mr. Smith. And by separating them out and treating them as a separate person and working with them, you're connecting with that person, underwriting that person. I think that's a really important philosophy.
I think it's really interesting. And I think it's such a, and I've done this for too long to say, but I don't know. I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know, I'd write a savings article, I don't know, every week. I'd write a mortgage article twice a week. You know, those would sort of generate all the time. I was thinking even with insurance, and I was looking at the stats saying that something like 3 times more people take out pet insurance than life insurance or critical illness insurance. And I thought, actually, it's almost true. I reckon I've written more pet insurance articles in my life than I have protection insurance. So I think there's I think part of that is sort of tangible. I think in a very, very practical way, pitching to an editor, it's really hard to pitch in protection stories. I think without going over all the ground we covered, but the complexity of the products, because as journalists, it's your job to explain those, but it is quite complex. You know, within a money team, you can explain things, trying to explain to an editor, an overall editor, it's really quite difficult, you know, decreasing, increasing, turn, you know, whatever, all these, you know, they want a, you know, bang, bang story of something. The trust issue is definitely there, you know, the editor will say, well, you know, there's going to be no payouts, you know, we're asking our readers now to buy these policies, they haven't got much money, are they going to get a payout? You know, the trust issue is there. I think definitely what we've talked about is kind of, it is almost an annual, you know, we haven't done life insurance for a while, we haven't done protection for a while, can you just sum it all up in one article? You know, you then try to do the entire income protection, you know, every bit of it, possibly with a bit of PPR or something stuck, you know, it was almost sort of bundled together. You do it once a year. I think what's interesting was Abbie's point that you go into these, it's because I think protection, a lot of it is so tailored to the individual that we can't just say, this is the best, you know, this is your top ISA to take out at the moment, this is, you know, definitely do this. So you are giving advice, or you're giving advice, I'm not giving advice to shifts, you're giving sort of guidance, but it's very hard then without, you know, you can then say, well, this 44-year-old man who smokes might get this. You're then giving very specific, very tailored examples. You can use those to help, but they will be so specific to an individual that it's quite hard to make that, you know, valid to a Sun readership or Express readership or, you know, the spectrum of readers there. And I think what the point I was going to make with that, actually, what was really helpful to have Steph here earlier is, you know, case studies have worked so well with protection articles. This person has got this, it has worked, they have claimed, we have had success with that. But absolutely no lie, it is a battle definitely to get those stories almost up the agenda and as, you know, sexy, for another word, as savings or insurance or mortgages, and definitely an ongoing battle with that.
it certainly applies back to the whole sort of plain land safely isn't news. Now, I won't name publications, but one publication did run a story relatively recently, and they told me that roughly speaking, for every 100,000 people that click on a pensions retirement savings story, 6,000 click on a protection story, which is part of the challenge. An editor's job is to get clicks and traffic and readership. So the importance of the issue, of course, has to be balanced with the readership of the market.
Social media, insurance, trust, I mean, just general views from the panel on whether we should be doing more to use social media in the right way.
Digital now has changed in terms of allowing it to be trust from institutions and actually starting to trust each other and trusting the man down the pub. And what social media has been able to do is allow that sort of access to trust. So using things like social media and different types of social media as well, I think is a really powerful thing for us to start to break down some of those barriers around complexity, around understanding, awareness, and motivation as well, I suppose.
When you're on social media, Fred, who's written, this company's great, well, A, he's authentic, and B, he's showing empathy because he might answer your question, or he might be a person like you. The problem is rigor. He doesn't know anything about the subject. Doesn't know, he hasn't got a fact find. So you've got to be sort of slightly careful.
What are you doing around brand loyalty to get those customers to keep coming back to you and to recognise you as a brand that's doing good?
I think brand loyalty is a really tough one because of how little interaction there is between an individual and their life insurer. And there's been some interesting initiatives in the industry around trying to engage more, particularly around engaging in people's health, where obviously the interests are aligned between the individual and the insurer, so that's helpful. But yes, brand loyalty I think is very difficult because you buy these things so infrequently that it's difficult to really build up that relationship.
Or is it if we have the right data in place to do this? Because actually what we were talking about is, and you might have seen the latest McKinsey report, talking about product density and looking at how we cross-sell, and looking at cross-sell from a position of trust. The more products you have with one, the more products you have, naturally you're going to go to them as your platform of choice. You trust this brand to continue to come back to them. But the challenge that we have with that is not being able to really interrogate data enough to be able to then say, this is the next best product for you. If you did these sorts of steps based on the data that we have and the information that we have, if you took these sorts of steps, this would be then available to you. And starting to use that as a way of building a long-term, lasting relationship, which will innately build trust over time.
If you could adopt one thing overnight that we've heard this morning that perhaps would most drive change or drive the quickest change, combined with the question of, well, how can we help people? What would those things be?
I think it's those personal stories that really hit home. So we can come up with as many stats as we want and people will just not believe them or be skeptical. Whereas I think it's the really personal stories like we heard this morning. And then I think the one thing leading on from that is building, so looking at the sort of nuance around trust and particularly on the side of sort of empathy. We need to be building these sort of personal relationships with policyholders. And that was what really struck me from Stephanie's account this morning, is how personally invested she was with British Friendly, with her particular contacts there. And that was great to hear, and that's so important. That's the only real way that we can build trust in the long term, I think.
Yeah, and I think being able to do that is reaching out to customers and engaging with customers. I think a few years ago when I did a presentation here, I might have upset one insurer when I held up my policy doc and said, I've never heard from these people. I don't know what my next best product is. Should I be taking more cover? Should I be doing these things? What are the good news stories? Why should I bother keeping this particular policy? And I think actually by engaging with customers and putting stories and case studies through, is naturally going to be a good thing. I think if the one thing is sort of leading on from Dan really is sort of talking about that culture, but embracing that long-term strategic vision and starting to address the major structural issues that we have. And I think it is actually quite exciting at the moment. We are seeing an enormous amount of engagement from insurers, reinsurers, looking at replatforming, looking at creating that long-term vision in order to be able to really start to deliver the best experience for customers and not just focusing on pricing and risk and starting to focus on those other areas. So I think it is quite an exciting time, and I'd like to see that continue.
Yeah, and I think, talking about Seven Families was great. It was really positive. I wrote about it. That was definitely, worked super well. And I think, again, not to cover all going again, but talking to Steph this morning, talking to her it was so interesting. She was so brought in. She actually used the word, Leslie was my friend. It was that sort of, she built that kind of relationship. And the other words, which I loved, she said, I look forward to my direct debit going out because I knew what that meant for my life. There's real tangible between that. And that's, she was so nervous this morning, so worried, I'm just a nurse, I'm going to know, but I don't know about the policy. I'm like, that's exactly what we need, is people like you saying, this is what it did, this is how it worked, this is how it changed my life. Your friend lost the roof over her head and you didn't. This is, a real tangible. I think that's, a human side to.
So culture, personal stories, engagement, and more Seven Families. Who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought it?